let's see. Awesome, we made it. Okay. Hello, everyone. Normally I have a little bit of an intro spiel. I normally do, but I feel like before I start that, I just need to say thank you so much for your patience. And also all the jokes in chat are pretty much what just kept me laughing instead of kind of looking at it like, oh no. So I think I mentioned a little bit in chat that behind the scenes we had a lot of support, and so there was about 4 of us working on getting this together for almost half an hour now. So I'm really happy we made it here and that we are in fact live, and well, that you've also all been so patient and kind of waited for us. So yeah, with that said, welcome to our KubeCon deep dive for day 2, and we're going to be talking about auto-scaling practices with Nomad. Specifically kind of more of your day 2. So we've done a lot of like kind of how do you get started, how do you set it up. We're going to talk a bit more about like metrics or common things you kind of might run into. I'm Jacquie Grindrod, and I'm a developer advocate here at HashiCorp, and today I'm here with James Rasell. I'll come back to us to do like an intro. Sorry, I should have told you that before. So we'll be talking about what do you do after your cluster is up and running and you're ready to take on the next challenges of auto-scaling. We'll discuss a couple key concepts. We've got some stuff lined up, and it's actually been my first technical demo since September that's live. So we're really hoping that the demo gods have been appeased with our assumed sacrifices today. And just kind of before we get into it, just as a reminder, if you have any questions or comments, we'd really love for you to interact with us in the chat. As you do, though, please just be mindful that we do have a code of conduct. In general, just be welcoming, inclusive, friendly, and patient. Be considerate, be respectful, and be professional. If you're looking for more information on our code of conduct, you can find it over at hashicorp.com/community-guidelines. And yeah, so normally I kind of host and we have a couple more people. Today it's me and James, so we'll both be talking today. As you know, developer advocate. You probably usually see me doing some Nomad stuff. Lately there's been a lot of Terraform and multi-cloud work, and there's some stuff there I'm really excited to share, but it's not today. And I guess, James, do you want to do an introduction and about?
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm James. I work on the Nomad ecosystem team as an engineer. Been here a year now. Feels longer and shorter at the same time. Kind of bizarre. And I've been using Nomad since 0.4. So, alongside autoscaling, if there are any questions, happy to try and answer them. And if I don't know the answer, Jacquie might know the answer. And if neither of us know the answer, everyone's kind of helping us out in the background and we can ask people. So just ask us anything you got.
That was bold. Ask us anything. Okay. We do have a really good support group. You probably normally see in the chat that we have other team members, and we have some wonderful community members who usually step up as well. Behind the scenes, we have a Slack channel that we have people watching with us, and we tend to kind of throw questions in there so that people can have a chance to give feedback in case one of us don't happen to know the exact answer live, because nobody knows everything. So yeah, I guess, how do we want to work through? We have a lot of announcements. I didn't really talk to you before we went live about how we wanted to talk through these, but we're doing it live today.
Zoom and YouTube got in the way, didn't they?
Yeah, we were on like 40 minutes early too. So
yeah, we can start with the Nomad 1.0 beta. I know this is supposed to be auto-scaling related, but that was a pretty huge announcement yesterday. Very exciting, and that's not me as kind of like a dewy-eyed fanboy. That's trying to take a rational approach on it.
Yeah, that's exciting. We do have, so we talked a little bit about this before we got on stream, but we'll also have a one-on-one webinar that I'll be doing, I think March 19th. I think so. So we'll be talking through some of the new features like memory over subscription and reserved CPU cores. We'll be talking a little bit about CSI. You can see I'm a little nervous about that already, but it's one of our #1 things we get asked about. So we'll have a CSI demo there as well. And I think we'll be talking some more auto scaling at that point too. So we kind of have those announcements on this list as well, that reserve CPU cores will be kind of improving the performance of your applications by making sure that your tasks have exclusive use of client CPUs. We've got some UI improvements. I think I've said this before, but I always love seeing what our UI team does. Like, it's really neat. I just kind of, I don't know, if I was going to fan our section, I love the ecosystem team, but the UI stuff is just, I don't know how to do it. And it just always feels like so good.
Yeah. I consider myself more a CLI person. But when I was looking through the list, I found it hard not to pick the UI stuff out, because the Nomad UI is really nice to use, and the new stuff that came in, like the fuzzy searching and the wildcard namespace edition, is super cool. Like, it's so nice to be able to go and use the UI just to browse around and see what's going on. So yeah, kudos there.
I was like, ah, yes, we're getting close to the end of that list, which is the point where I do a demo, and I'm just like frantically closing extra tabs from troubleshooting over here. Making sure everything's running fine, hopefully. We'll find out.
It'll be all good.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Also, the updates to the memory and the CPU stuff's kind of cool. Kind of in the background, more than most. But the oversubscription, super useful, just for being able to manage not ohming your applications so rapidly and readily. And reserve CPU cores, super interesting, super useful for particular types of workload, and can kind of link into autoscaling in a way. Doesn't affect it, but the types of applications and that use or become kind of more optimized with reserve CPU cores kind of bring an interesting challenge to autoscaling.
I opened YouTube to link some things in, and then heard us talking back, and just we're having that kind of day. You can find the beta blog releases here. Just dropping that into chat right now if you're interested. And I think we mentioned something else linkable, actually. We talked about autoscaler upgrade, right?
Not yet. So
Not
yeah.
yet. Okay. Well, sorry.
But there's a call out in the chat as well about the remote task drivers. Technical preview, certainly probably one of the flashier items released, and really interesting. But yeah, I think it was yesterday or Monday. This week's kind of blended into one. We released the Autoscaler 3.3, which is kind of the final in the 0.3 series, which is kind of tried to focus on usability, heavily influenced by kind of feedback from the community and users that we've had, particularly focused around strategy plugins and just making it so that the autoscaler can be used in some slight more representative environments that we've got the feedback on. So it's been a pretty big week. Lots to come, and exciting to talk about it all.
Yes. And, oh, I feel like I'm doing speaker coaching exercises. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to yes and us like that. But yes, and you can find the Autoscaler version release notes for 0.3.3 here, which I have also linked in chat. Yeah. Today's just doing it live. It's fine. Everything's good. I think that's all we had for this section, right? For our announcements?
Yeah, I think so. If you're ready for the demo.
Stress intensifies. We'll be ready or we won't. That's fine. It's up there. It's theoretically ready. And I'm running this on 2 computers today because I'm having some monitor real estate problems right now.
And live debugging a demo is kind of as deep dive as it gets, right? So.
Oh, don't say that. Don't curse me like this. Let's see. I've got my UI open. I'm about to screen share. I'm just making sure I have all my IP addresses more or less hidden before we start doing that. Of course, it's opening in a different window. Why would it not? Okay. Yeah, so we're pretty much doing this one live today. I worked on it a lot yesterday, but the plan was to come on earlier today and work on some speaker notes for it. And as you know, soon. So that's fine. Everything is good. It'll be fine. What could go wrong? Exactly, right? Let's just make sure we can see everything. Just do a quick clear. And we're really hoping. So what we've got set up right now is I already went ahead and ran the Terraform code earlier this morning, which probably was another moment of like, I could leave this up overnight. I'll run it in the morning. What could go wrong? So that worked out, and that's pretty ideal. I'm trying to find the notes I do have for this so that we can actually talk through it a little bit, and it's not just kind of me being like, I ran a command, look. So what we've got is we're running our images inside of autoscaling groups, which is an important detail because we're going to be doing an on-demand batch job demo. Louise and I believe Charlie, but yeah, I think Charlie as well, also worked on this demo, and it's really exciting to see. There's going to be a Learn guide coming out for it soon. We're just kind of putting some polishing on it, and you'll be able to kind of run this from learn.hashicorp.com as well. And yeah, what it does is it goes into Amazon. It's an AWS-based environment. We're going to have some auto-scaling groups. We'll have some small machines in it. And the plan that we should see is we're going to run a batch job. And it's going to go, hey, I don't have enough resources for it. We'll see that in our Grafana board. Where is it? Here. So we got it up and running. What we're expecting to see is we'll run the batch job, and it's going to give us a line that says, hey, I don't have enough resources to run this job. So we're going to then see it kind of scale up. Yeah. Talking through it in advance just in case we get that point and then I forget to say things because I'm staring at like, please work. It worked last night, so famous last words. These are the jobs that we have up and running right now. So we've got some Prometheus metrics going on. We've got the Autoscaler plugin that's here. And yeah, we're going to run a batch job. So come over to here. Double check my command before I type it because I don't trust my typing at all today. Not with earlier. All right. I could have just started typing and it was going to help me out. That's fine. Auto-complete and suggestions is fantastic. So we're going to be running a dispatch job, as I said. So let's click that button. So what we're seeing is that it's complete, but it failed to place all of our allocations. So that's kind of that key part around we don't really have enough resources and space for it. So we're going to wait, I think it's a minute or two, and then we should see kind of a blue line. There we go. Perfect. As you can see, we got a job queued. I'm pointing at my monitor like you can see me, but this blue line right here is saying that, hey, yeah, demo's YOLO. I'll come back to that. There's a story about that. But we can see that it's kind of gone up, it's queued, and what should be happening in the background is it is scaling up Amazon EC2 instances. And then we're going to see that the job actually runs. I probably should have shown the AWS console or something for that, but I don't know if there's any information I can't show because I didn't think about that before the live demo part. So my instructions tell me to do 2 more dispatches. So let's add 2 more while we're waiting for that first one. I'm just double checking the notes to make sure I've said everything that we should know. Yeah, it's really apt that I named that directory YOLO because that's kind of just where we are today. So we can see that they're queued. We can see, so over here, you can kind of see this is tracking the number of nodes we had. We had 1, it's going up to 3, and they're provisioning and getting ready. The original desired size of the ASG is a great question. I think it was 1. Yeah.
It's probably also worth noting that on that bottom left graph, that the blue dotted line, what we do is we have Loki running, and it looks and filters the logs from the autoscaler. So that is that's the autoscaler saying I've done an autoscaling event. So that actually is the indication of when we have a new autoscaling instance coming into play for Nomad.
Nice. And now we've got some changes. You can see we've got one running, we've got one that's green. So we can kind of just see that it's coming in and it's happening. As they continue progressing through, we'll see that they're finishing and then they're stopping. Yeah, so I think this is super cool. My like DevOps background originally was like, oh, we could do things like have a Jenkins and manage all of our worker nodes based on like CI throughput. Whether that's exciting for everybody else here is totally different question, but that's like the first thing that jumped to my mind. There's of course other use cases, like maybe you have an application and you have a back end and you just get hammered with traffic when you weren't expecting it. You can kind of scale out and run things that way. Of course, batch jobs. I think we had discussed ETL pipelines is another really good example of when to use something like this.
Yeah, exactly. This was kind of born. The demo was kind of a result of interactions we had with community and users, that this kind of scaling up from zero, this batch workload is something that it fits quite well onto Nomads with prioritized jobs, and is something that people are interested in. So particularly this demo exercises some of the new features that we've added. I don't know if you want me to talk about those now or...
Absolutely. This sounds like a great idea.
Excellent. So probably, as I mentioned, we added some strategy plugins. Before 3.0, we only had the target value, which is fine, and it works really well when you're kind of working with connection limits and incoming requests to kind of balance those across your web apps and that kind of thing. But it can be quite tricky to figure out because of the way that it works, calculates internally, and the factors that you can come out with. And so this particular demo uses what we have is called a pass-through strategy. And what that does, it effectively takes the metric that gets queried from your APM. In this case, I believe it is the summation of the running jobs and the pending jobs. So how many jobs do I want running, right? With the idea that maybe you have large batch jobs and they fit onto a special type of machine, GPU. Some of these machines that have terabytes of RAM, very expensive, and you don't want to be running them all the time unless you're a billionaire, right? So the idea with this is that your APM, your query, crafting your query, you know how many instances you want running. And the pass-through does what it says on the tin. It just takes that value and passes it straight back out as the desired count. So your APM says you need 5 instances. So I concur, you should have 5 instances. And yeah, it's a simple but very powerful strategy. It's really nice. And I'm just going to make it bigger. And so now we've got one complete. So if I'm right in remembering, the parameterized job that's being triggered has a random sleep in it, which is why we might see some jobs complete quicker than others. And if we look at the client nodes per class, so the platform, I believe, is there to run the monitoring, the autoscaler, because we can't really autoscale if we're not running the autoscaler and the APM. So that's our separate node class. And we have this batch node class. And the autoscaler has another bit of functionality that I believe was in 3.2, which is in the target. So in our autoscaling group target, you can have a node selector strategy, which is a mouthful. And that essentially allows you to control which nodes are selected for termination. In this particular example, when you're running your batch workload, these are completing in minutes, but as you alluded to, Jacquie, like ETL pipelines, they can run for hours, days. longer. And so this particular strategy is using an empty ignore system. We have empty, we also have this empty ignore system. And what that does is when the autoscaler is selecting nodes to terminate, it will only ever select nodes that are not running allocations, which means we don't try and terminate nodes which are running your very expensive batch workloads and then try and migrate them so they have to start over again. So yeah, that's two of the nice little things we have in this demo. And it's a lovely dashboard. So Louise, great work. Dashboards are always on fire.
I was just messaging him in a back channel, like, thank you for making this so easy and making it look so good that like we're still able to kind of run through it today. I think, yeah.
The dashboard is kind of encapsulates it perfectly. And now what we should see is, because I believe, let me just zoom in again, that all the jobs completed, we should actually see that clients per node class decrease, ideally to 0, down to 1. And that's good. So without checking all the logs, what's probably happening in the background is because the worker pool is quite underutilized, because we're not running expensive instances for a demo and we're not running these huge batch jobs. The autoscaler probably did want to actually scale the cluster in because there wasn't a huge amount of utilization, but the selective strategy is actually stopping it doing any work because it can't find appropriate nodes to terminate. And there we go, batch is 0. We still got our dashboards running. Nice, smooth, great.
We made it. Honestly, very smooth considering everything.
Great work, love it.
Yeah, I think that brings us to the end of this one. I've got way too many tabs open, so I keep losing all of the notes I do have. Yep, that brings us to the end. So I think, as it was kind of alluded to in the chat, we do have an autoscaler group that starts at 0, as Louise mentioned. And the idea is that way you're not paying for things when you don't actually use them. So you're only paying for it when you're actually using your resources. And I think we are good with this one and can move on.
Excellent work.
Thank you, Louise and Charlie. Pretty sure you're both in chat.
Yeah, really nice. Yeah, it's I don't know. Scale from 0 is one of those kind of grails, right? Like it's a really nice thing to have. Louise did some work recently as well in Nomad core to expose some more metrics to make it easier to scale from 0, which will be coming out with the 1.1 release. So keep your eyes on that. But nice, yeah. So I don't know. Data autoscaling, is it hard? It can be, yeah.
Let's talk about that. I think we were planning on talking next about additional scaling metrics and kind of, we have bullet points, but kind of typically you might see something historically kind of like, oh, I'm going to scale based on my CPU resources or something similar. And, we're going to talk a bit about what we can use now. Well, by we, I mean, I think you're going to talk a little bit about it. I should have wrote these as real questions, but we just have bullet points. So
no, it's all good. Yeah, as you say, kind of traditional autoscaling. Well, traditional, or the first place that people might look, myself included, when I first learned about ECT and the wonders of autoscaling groups, is my first foray into that area was running a big PHP web app in front of using Apache. And you use CPU in memory. They're the obvious ones. I'm not that old, but when I was doing that, it felt like an age ago, and it was a natural thing. There wasn't a huge amount of telemetry, or at least it wasn't commonplace to expose so much data that we have now. And so we'd use CPU or memory. I'm going to pick on CPU. because that's the easy one. But CPU in itself isn't a great auto-scaling data point. It can be very spiky. And in particular, it doesn't really indicate how busy your actual application really is. 100, like CPU at 100% is perfect, right? Like if you're not using 100% of your CPU, you're wasting money. So it's the goal, but it can be a bit weird. And so someone internally someone on the SRE team gave a great talk with with an analogy that I want to kind of share as well, which kind of encapsulates using CPU as a scaling metric, which is if you go to the bank and there's you've got tellers, which I believe is an American term. I hadn't really heard that before. And you have different lines of people queuing to talk to their teller, person that looks after their money. What a manager might do in that situation, or the person that's in charge, is depending on the queue in front of each person, they might add more tellers to manage that, but it doesn't actually encapsulate how busy each person is. They might be doing 10 seconds of work per customer, which means they can get through it in a quick time, or they might have a very short queue, but each person takes an hour to help to their requests. And so CPU is quite a finicky one to get right, but it is often a very good starting point. The same with memory. And that's one of the harder things to get right, I believe, is picking what metric is right for your application. Because it requires a lot of work. It requires understanding your application fully. It requires getting the data that you want in the right place. And so it's kind of about a better understanding of what does busy mean for your app. My application could be bound by connection to the database. So if I start scaling my app, it's not really going to help that situation. It's going to make things really worse. So do you auto scale the database? Probably not, but there are things to optimize, right? But now with all this kind of telemetry and data we have, the data's there, it's just very hard to understand it. We often use connections, number of incoming requests as a decent metric. Yeah, I don't know. It's quite a lot of babble about CPU.
I'm so sorry, I've been making faces. It sounds like there's somebody in my apartment like banging giant tubes together or something, and I have no idea what it is. And it's paused, so hopefully it stays stopped because today. Thank you.
So yeah, CPU memory, good starter, kind of bad in the long run. Once you do kind of maybe understand what the right metrics are, and we're talking, I guess, here specifically about application scaling, and then we can chat about cluster scaling because that's a whole different area of trickiness. You've got to craft your APM queries. So, as external sources at the moment, we support Prometheus and Datadog, which have 2 different querying languages. And you can create kind of super complex queries. The demo, at least as an example, uses sum, or, on, and vector. So, it uses some mildly complex things to just get the right metric. And also modifications over time, right? So your application might get busier, it might get more popular, hopefully not less popular, but it's an evolving thing. And when you start to auto scale your application, it's likely that you might uncover weird things that you never understood. Maybe this application isn't used to being stopped, started all the time. And so fair warning, if you put an autoscaler in your environment to autoscale your application, like monitor the application, expect that things might go a bit awry. So always, I don't know, put it in staging first, put it in dev, like just keep an eye on it, monitor it, understand it, because it might uncover things that you didn't know. It might work smoothly. They're fear mongering. I just see a question around, does anyone know a query designer for the APMs? I do not. That would be very nice. I think Louise looked into that in a broad area. Maybe he knows anything around that. But it is really tricky. Yeah. But that's just on app scaling. That's the easier one, particularly in how the Nomad scaling API is kind of fairly straightforward to use. At least you just say, hey, here's my job, here's my group, I want 10 of this, and Nomad internally handles all the logic of, okay, how many are running? Okay, let me make sure I'm matching what the user has requested, and off it goes. And then I guess cluster scaling, a very different beast to app scaling. App scaling is all around understanding your application. Cluster scaling is, I generally try and treat it as a fault tolerance exercise, as well as an understanding of your deployments. If you're running Nomad deployments, for example, like maybe you're using canaries, maybe you're using rolling deploys. So if you're running your cluster very close to the allocated limit, let's say you have 95% allocation, you want to run lean, you want to run cost efficient, right? If you're to that limit, maybe you can't deploy everything. Maybe you have a monorepo, or maybe you have I'm thinking Java kind of dependency tree where you have lots of microservices that depend on each other. An update to kind of a core dependency might trigger a cascade of deployments across all the dependent services. And so if you actually don't have overhead in that, then your deployment's going to be slow. Maybe they won't work properly because you can't find the space to place those canaries or those blue-green parts of the deploy. And then secondly, you've got the fault tolerance. So maybe you want to plan for X% of your nodes failing at once. If we're focusing on Amazon here, because I think we're both familiar with that, maybe you want to plan around an AZ having problems, right? So you account for, okay, so if 25% of my nodes go away, can that work be migrated super quickly without having to wait and try and spin up a load of instances? Because we all know that if you have problems in cloud providers, there's that kind of thundering herd effect where everyone has the same problems and tries to spin up more instances in availability zones at work. So it's a hard exercise, it's a hard balance to understand what those thresholds are. Jacquie, feel free to interrupt me anytime if I'm just babbling on about random stuff.
No, this is great. Okay. And I think the availability zones is it's such a good point, because I think sometimes people remember to put the extra ones in, and regions too. And sometimes it's just so specific that you're not really easily able to pivot elsewhere. But I think especially in the last year, there's been a lot of examples of cases where you might have needed this. There's been like data centers that have been on fire. There's been outages in different regions or different availability zones. I don't want to point any names, but US East one. But, sometimes there's like a higher latency and it just makes more sense to move somewhere else. And that completely makes sense, right? So I think it's a good point to kind of look into what autoscaling looks like in there, but also somewhere else, and be ready to kind of pivot. So
yeah. And that's really just kind of getting into the understanding of what your thresholds should be, not how to auto scale. Cluster scaling out, kind of okay. Luckily, it's a one API call, kind of the same way Nomad works. Hey, I would like to increment this count. I want an extra 3 or whatever. Scaling in is the hard bit. In terms of making sure you have the threshold like we've been talking about, but also it requires a lot more work. So in the case of Nomads, we want to drain them. We want to select the node first. We've talked about the node selectors. So I want to make sure that I'm selecting nodes which are maybe they have the least amount of work running. Because I want to migrate, I want to interrupt the least amount of applications. And so that's great. Okay, so we've selected a node, let's say, and then we've got to drain it. So now we drain it. Now we wait for the work to come off that node, which relies on quite a few things. It relies that we can talk to the API properly. It also relies on your applications behaving kind of well, so that they listen for signals that they might send to it. And so we have to wait for that to happen. And then once we drain the node and we've confirmed it's drained, we have to go and ask Amazon to take that node out of. So it's kind of, there's 3 distinct sections, and in all of the sections, things can go wrong. And it's tricky. It's really tricky. Cloud providers have kind of made autoscaling seem very standard, mundane, and boring, which is great. They're great to use, but yeah, not so much. And then kind of Louise just said something to bring up, which is super interesting. Going back to what you said, Jacquie, around autoscaling groups, clouds, and things like that. So I think it was a year ago now. It seemed a long time ago. Or clicking close. Eric Veld did a demo around cloud bursting, autoscaling cloud bursting, which is the premise that maybe you're running in a data center in a colo facility, and I don't know, maybe your contract lasts another 2 or 3 years. And so you want to use that hardware, right? It's a lot of sunk cost if you don't. But on occasion, you have bursts of traffic, or you want to run some batch jobs which you just can't run in the facility you have. So the idea there is you can actually use the autoscaler to burst into the cloud and spin up a load of clients like this batch demo, and to have that excess run in an elastic environment, and then once that excess goes, kind of just go back to your normal colo environment. Some other interesting kind of cloudy things we've been discussing, I'd be hesitant to try and do a demo around it at the moment, is multi-cloud. We now support, officially we have GCP, AWS, and Azure plugins for Target, so we can support those 3 cloud providers. The brilliant community that we have as well has also developed DigitalOcean, Hertz in the Cloud, and I believe there's even a VMware ESXi Target plugin. And so this is the idea that we can scale to different clouds based on whatever kind of business logic or any requirements you have. One of the things that we particularly talk about, or I talk about in my head, is the idea of even scaling on spot price. Hey, Amazon's really cheap at the moment for this type of instance I want. I'm going to go and run there. Now, I don't know if GCP has spot instances, but I'm going to assume they do. Now GCP is super cheap. I want to migrate my work into the cluster running there. Nomad's got a good multi-region federation story, and so that's something super possible. Even kind of the idea of, hey, is this cloud behaving well? Is it online? Is the status good? If it's not, like we said, well, maybe that cloud's having problems. With Amazon, if IAM's having problems, then the whole of Amazon is having problems because it's a single region. So I'm going to move all my stuff over to another cloud provider and weather the storm over there. Lots.
I feel like we've picked a little bit on Amazon today, but it's not so much that we're like, oh, they have problems, as it's just kind of the most recent example I think that we're thinking of, or at least I've got the most experience in it over my career. So
same here as well.
Yeah.
I have there. That's why I don't pick on it to be mean. I pick on it because it's familiar.
Exactly. I was going to say something else and then I completely blanked. But you did mention the cloud bursting demo, and you're right, that was actually last July. So I dropped a link to the blog post for that in chat for anyone who's interested in seeing a little bit more about it. Oh my God, it's back. Can you hear that?
Sounds like someone's scratching at your wall, like a kind of weird horror story.
It's been going on for like 15 minutes. Please make it stop.
No. Let me just look at my notes. Horror stories. We talk about some weird horror stories as there's someone scratching at Jackie's door. So the autoscaler in particular tries to be kind of defensive and help you. So we have things like cooldowns, like setting minimum and maximum values. This is all to try and help prevent bad and or costly things happening when an autoscaler is running in your account. And it's not necessarily the autoscaler's fault. It can be because multiple reasons. My particular horror story is Jenkins build clients running mad over a bank holiday weekend. This was back as well when Amazon was in a per hour billing mode. And so what we had is we had an autoscaler running, and we didn't set any of the parameters right. So we set the cooldown wrong, we set probably a multitude of things wrong. And we made a config change, which meant that the new agents that would come online weren't able to pass their health checks. And so it meant that we just kept launching instances. They would try and connect for X amount of time and then get terminated. And the new one will come on, but we would pay an hour per instance. And that took quite a while to get over, to figure out. And so that's that. That's my horror story. I don't know if you have any to share apart from the scratching in your house, Jacquie.
I do. Let's hope it stays away while I try to speak for a bit. Yeah, surprise ending is coming from inside the house. Please no. But I honestly have no idea what it is. But I guess that's just kind of, we're talking a lot about things that can go wrong. And I guess that's just one of the catches, right, of working from home. We can't really control the environment around us and outside of us. So that's just kind of where we're at. As far as scaling stories, though, I have a few. I'm like, how many details do I need to wipe out of this story to be able to say it live? Probably fine. Still
No.
identifying. No details. Oh yeah, that won't be bad. So yeah, my introduction to auto scaling when I was really, really young in my career, like my first year, maybe. I think it was like my 11th to like 14th month or something like that. Somewhere in that first like year or two. We had this like case where we needed to do some scaling. And I hadn't done scaling before. At this point, like I had just learned how to use GitHub. I had just learned about VPCs and Amazon and Jenkins, and it was a very busy time in my career. And I was just kind of like, wow, everything's full of possibility, and this is great. And we had to do this kind of short-lived event that we were going to scale for. And all the reading I had done on like blog posts on the internet was like, oh yeah, you probably start out with like a low amount of traffic. Ooh, I just punched my mic, we're fine. And then, as people come in, it'll come up and it'll scale and then it'll come down. And I was like, that makes sense. Yeah, I was wrong. So peak traffic was actually within the first 10 minutes of my application being live. So of course it was not ready. Like my app was just like, what have you done? Why did you do this to me? There was not enough scaling. And I think we lost like, I don't know, maybe 10% of the viewers in the first couple of minutes. So like maybe, I don't remember numbers, like 10,000 people or something like that. And it was a lot of people. Like, and what had happened was it caused them to miss a very, very prominent speaker that I probably shouldn't name on this live stream. But it was one of those moments where it was very impactful for me because it was just kind of like, oh my God. It might have been like a president of a country that I made these people miss because I didn't quite know about auto scaling well enough yet. So that was kind of a moment where it was just like, whoa, like I thought these patterns would work, and then they totally did not. And I kind of learned a lot about that. Of course, there's secondhand stories. I've got so many friends that have shared stories with me that specifically banks where they've won an autoscaler, maybe their credit card payments or a system like a payment system where you might get thousands or millions of requests per second. And they tried to autoscale it. This was actually a Lambda one. I think in like 8 hours, it autoscaled up like $15,000. And they were just like, oh, we did not want this. So, just kind of, again, just thresholds. And there's a minimum where you want to make sure you're getting that and your viewers aren't missing or your users aren't missing like key events or information. But you also want to make sure that you're hitting that upper threshold and you're not just like obliterating your bank account, because that's kind of a good way to not be able to do, I guess, good infrastructure going forward. So you kind of have to make that back somehow in a lot of situations, especially if you're in like a smaller company where you have a very limited budget. Just kind of making sure you know how high you want to scale and how low you can be and still kind of survive. I think a key part of this we're really hinting at, I think, without saying, is load testing. Make sure that you do your auto scaling and you're actually testing it. I know personal experience, it can be really hard in the ops position sometimes to get that buy-in time to write the tests and do it, because you're often kind of sprinting from release to, go live or feature go live. But it's completely worth it to just make sure you do have that time in and that you are testing that things work as you think they will. Another similar example, like we did some auto scaling, but we had some CNAMEs in front of it at a previous company. And we had this whole plan, we tested it, and somebody kind of went, oh, there's this new feature with CNAMEs that like, if it detects that there's no traffic, it'll automatically switch it. This looks good. And, on paper, it looked great, but it caused like a 30-minute outage because there was some auto scaling. It read it as, oh, it's dead. Switch back to the old environment, which was actually down. I should have told so much more of this story. We had like, basically my cloud provider was like, the whole region you're on, we're going to take it offline for like 6 hours. And I worked in a company where you can't go offline for that long. You just can't. Our tolerance was 43 minutes per month. So can't do that. It violates all of my SLAs. So just kind of, being aware of your environment and what kind of things you can do to make it more resilient and make it tested and make sure it just works as you're expecting it to. I think those are really key to do with auto scaling and just even without it. So I think that's my story for today.
Yeah, I everything there completely spot on. As pointed out in chat, the word also is extremely misleading. Yeah, it is because there's lots of complexity and lots of things to understand about scaling your environments. And yeah, trying to understand it is super important. The autoscaler tries to emit metrics, does its best to emit useful metrics so that you can keep an eye on the autoscaler. So in that dashboard, for example, that we had in the demo, the log lines are coming from the autoscaler. There's also events around, hey, I've had this many failures trying to do this autoscaling, so you can do some alerts around that. If the autoscaler is trying to autoscale and it can't do it, then that's something to worry about. On the Nomad side, we try to be very defensive in that sense, so that if you want to autoscale a job and the autoscaler suggests, hey, I need to up this limit, but the job is in the deployment, Nomad actually won't touch that. It's kind of one of the safest options that we initially made. We might revisit it at a point, but when you're deploying a job, it's kind of in an unstable state anyway. And we don't want to make that instability worse by trying to change counts and mess around with it. All about understanding. And if you struggle to get the time to do this kind of testing, always kind of, I guess, throw the money idea around. So your managers, right, that always gets some attention. Well, okay, if we can't do this load testing, or I don't get an extra week to maybe put these, understand it a bit better. Well, if I go away for the weekend and it goes awry, it might cost us X $1,000. It's a thing, right? It's a worry. As well as taking your customers offline, it's costing the business money.
Exactly. I was going to say it's an upfront employee time cost. I'm putting the time in and I'm working on it, or it's either users have lost cost or we've scaled and literal cost. So
yes, exactly. I see we're close to time.
Yeah, I think we're actually pretty much good to start wrapping up. Just really hoping that noise stays away for a tiny bit longer.
Is there any questions in chat for either of us? In a jaded experience that you have?
I think we'll have to wait like 30 seconds-ish for them to hear that. Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to hear stories because there's always something you can learn from them. And I swear, like everybody in the industry has their like top 5 or top 10 moments where like, yeah, I learned a lot from this. Not all of mine are scaling. Some of them are storage related. Some of them are security group related. Some of them are database related. But, you know, it's always nice to kind of hear and learn from other people's experiences so you don't have to step through it exactly yourself, too. It looks like it is still quiet in chat. Repo link for the demo. I'll type it, so we'll go faster. The demo I did? Question mark.
Yeah, I have that handy if it is that one.
Perfect. I actually, ironically, don't think I have it open right now. Oh, that's a lie. I do.
It's probably worth noting if it is that demo that there will be a learn guide that accompanies that. That's currently just being reviewed. So the demo itself might be a bit of self-discovery if you try it out immediately, but that will be coming soon.
That is a really good point. I was just writing, I believe it's still a little bit work in progress because, as you said, we do have the learn guide. I think there's also a blog post that's going to be releasing related to it. Learn guide and blog post on the way, but you can find the code here. I'm so sorry. You're stuck with my clickety-clacking while I try to shut. Yes. Met the character requirement. Yeah, and I think that brings us to time. So I just really want to say again, like, thank you so much, everyone, for your patience today and waiting and still being here and the engagement and chat with us. It's been one of those do it live kind of streams, but it's really nice to have the community that's always here and supportive. And of course, thank you so much, James, as well, for kind of rolling with it. And I've been honestly coming so prepared, like this was great. And then to those behind the scenes with us, also making sure that everything works. It was great. I'm so happy to have so much support.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me. And it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. And yeah, as you said, shout out to I do love the community. I was an avid member, and now on the other side, I appreciate it, and I love seeing the same faces pop up here and there. And if you have feedback, reach out to us. That helps us all the time because we have an idea of what might be the right thing to do, but we're not the people that are running this stuff in critical environments. So we're always happy to listen.
Definitely. I thank you for reminding me. If you do have things you want to share with us, we do have discuss.hashicorp.com where we kind of can see more of your like code problems, or we can discuss things with you. I'm considering doing open community office hour calls if you've got feedback you'd like to bring back as a practitioner. So if that's something you want, please, please, please at me on Twitter or message me somehow and let me know that you're interested in this so I can start blocking off time for it. We do have, what else do we have? I'm drawing a huge blank right now. There's the learn.hashicorp.com if you want to actually work through our guides. They're great. I've learned so much from them, so it's awesome. And I think that's everything for today. We still have some more KubeCon demos coming up this week. I did not open this in advance, but that's okay. We can type live, hopefully with no typos. Let's see, what do we still have coming up? So today was our third one out of 5. Tomorrow we'll have a deep dive on operators and providers. And then the day after, and then on Friday, we're going to have a deep dive on console servers matched on Kubernetes. So there's still 2 left. You can find those as well as our regular upcoming community office hours at hashicorp.com/community/office hours, dropping that into chat. And with that, thank you so much for joining us today. And wherever you are, I hope you have a good morning or afternoon or evening. And if you're enjoying KubeCon, then I hope you get to enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Bye, everyone.
See you.